Hi, here we are in the second conversation in the frame of this series of conversation in the project organized by Polo del Novecento, Avere 20 anni al tempo dei populismi, which is directed by Fondazione Nocentini and Istituto Salvemini. Today we are pleased to have here with us Yorgos Konstantinou, who is a Greek artist based in Berlin. In this moment he is on the Mount Olympus, so he's in the very middle of Greece. And Marina Petrillo, who is an Italian journalist. At the moment I think she's in her house in Milan. And we are going to speak about the main topic of this conversation will be fake news, hate speech, and also all these topics are under a big question, which is what happens when the many are against the very few, when there are a minority that is attacked by a majority. All these topics, which apparently are considered theoretical, are not, and we will discover it seeing the work of Yorgos Konstantinou, his action in art, and also in the words of Marina Petrillo, who was a very special witness to a lot of news, and she's a very well-known journalist in Italy. But in particular, we will focus on what she witnessed in Egypt during the revolution. So it will be very, very, for me, important conversation, and I'm very curious to listen to both of you. So first of all, I would like to give the floor to our international guest, Yorgos, and I'm asking you to present yourself, your work as an artist, as an activist also.
Thank you very much, Elettra. Thank you very much for the invitation. I consider myself actually an engineer of visual communication, which is a way to describe what I'm doing, which is to visualize thoughts and ideas according to the audience, to the need, to the specific medium. So there is lots of ways to express oneself, and this is what I do. And I've been active as a drawer, as a cartoonist since I'm very young. I lived until my 18th year in Greece. Then I moved to Berlin in mid-80s. I lived the times of change in Berlin, the fall of the wall and everything. And then I moved to Catalonia, where I've been actually pretty active in the anti-fascist movement, in migrant movements. And in 6 years, I'm back in Berlin, where more than any time before, I'm really into drawing contents which show what's happening in my home country, in Greece, with a main focus on the migrant question and on migration and refuge. And my work is mainly published through social media, but also it's also used by many movements and social movements in all those three countries, which I consider myself to be part of. And yes, if you have any more questions, I would love to answer.
Okay, Yorgos, you are always very shy in presenting yourself, so I will help you showing your images and to the people who is looking to this webinar, to this conversation, to discover your engineering work with drawings in social communication. I will ask to Marina to enter into the main topic of the discussion, and to see together how hate speech characterizes, in a certain sense, diametrically, the relationship between the many towards the few. It is like saying inherent in populism from the French Revolution to today. But let's get to the characteristics of today and what you saw as a privileged witness in Egypt during the revolution, in Tahrir Square, of course, and how was the hate speech built in that process, because it was very important, and how long is it still standing?
Thank you, Elettra. It's a pleasure to be with you and Yorgos, and thank you to Fondazione Nocentini for having us today. Well, the theme is huge, very large, put it in these terms. My experience from in a small avant-garde of journalism between 2010 and 2015, including working with the only live social media journalism enterprise that ever existed, which was called Reportedly, and it was published. It was directed by Andy Carvin, and it was published in the US by First Look Media. The experience was almost always free of hate speech. There was from zero to very little noise on social media. We would work to sift through voices, especially new voices that had gone long unheard. Social media gave them, they really literally took the microphone. And I love that metaphor because I come from 25 years as a journalist in radio. And the social media were very much like radio for me. Now, imagine 10 years later, the Arab Spring is a very far memory. I have tried to tell him in my third latest book that Elettra knows how initially the contagion of the new voices coming from the Arab Spring spread to the whole world, including Kiev, and including, of course, Athens and Thessaloniki, where most of my friends doing the same job live. And but up to Hong Kong, up to 2019, and also having a sort of back kick in Cairo, which was erased by the regime. The difference between 10 years ago or 12 years ago when I started and today is that the work I did in 2011 on the Arab Spring today would be impossible. On one side, the noise has become absolutely overwhelming in comparison with the reasonable voices and the reliable sources, and also the brave people who took the microphone to speak, telling their own stories, and especially from the streets and the occupied squares. The noise on one side, and the fact that most of the people have been discouraged and repressed very heavily, some of them with prison and torture and death along the years for speaking up. So what we did 12 years ago, very sadly, we believed was going to stay, but it would be impossible today. But I have to say that we actually saw in between these 12 years, everything was not the same. The first acute crisis of hate speech that I witnessed was around 2014, 2015, when I first with Reportedly, and then as editor-in-chief of a magazine about migrations, I saw happening on the theme of migration. And most of the time, first with very small dimensions, and today with extremely large dimensions, hate speech on migration was already industrialized. There were people paid in troll factories to build up hate against migrants, hate against NGOs working to rescue migrants in the Mediterranean and so on. I don't want to take up too much time, but I can expand on that. Hate was always present. I can remember hate on our open microphones 20 years ago over at the radio station. I remember that. You know, people calling in to just insult whoever was on the microphone. But the scale was manageable. The scale was always personal. The scale was always human. Today, what we're witnessing is hate speech on an industrialized scale, used and commercialized, weaponized by people who earn money out of it. So that's a huge difference. And like with everything that went out of the human scale in the last 10 years, we are not able to manage it. I am assisting my boss at the European Parliament with the Inge Commission, and the Inge Commission has been working for the last 2 years on fake news and hate speech. And the first thing that I can say is that we need to go back to the roots of fake news and hate speech, because what we are witnessing is a crisis of trust, and the trust was destroyed a long time ago, and very slowly for a lot of social strata of society. And we may dislike it, but they are right to be distrustful and to be hateful and to be, there's a lot of very good reasons why people hate other people, and especially why the many hate the few. The sad part of this is that it's very destructive and it's not constructive, and also because it's being weaponized by the few, once again, who are using the weak to build up an army of haters. That basically puts people against people. But then I think we can expand on that, on the deep reasons of hate speech as I see them.
It would be very interesting to know what do you mean when you say going back to the roots. So we would like just take a note and remember that I would like you to underline this part. So Yorgos, I put this image which is connected with what Marina was saying, but it is one of the clues and of the center of your engineering operation with images about the construction of the hate speech on migration. So can you tell us more about this part of your work? Start from the part you prefer, and if you forget something, I promise you that I will record you to say more, okay?
Yes, I pretty much agree with what Marina just said, that there is a pretty new dimension in all that, that actually we've been witnessing how much hate speech has come into the center of society. Like we are living right now in Greece, a moment where all this discourse about the enemy, about invasion, about people who want to Islamize us and who want to deteriorize our democracies, all this has become part of the narrative that the government uses, which is something we couldn't really imagine some years ago. But this is happening every day more and more. And we see how actually there is this army of haters which reproduce this discourse, and how much it interferes into the discourse of the whole spectrum of political parties. And they have managed to shift the whole the whole discussion to a place which actually tries to give an answer to absolutely irrational arguments. So, like if you see the pictures, the picture you showed just before about the work of independent journalists, it's pretty. It's a good example of what's happening. Instead of getting to the point, which is that we have a very violent response of our democracies to the legal and to this absolutely legitimate need of people to move to a safer society. What instead of focusing on that, we are focusing on the people who transmit this information. Like now, the people who dare to talk about those things are becoming victims of attack, in a sense, in a way that it actually takes away all your energy just to answer accusations, instead of having time to create, to report and to talk and to explain what's happening. What you have to do is to prove that you're not an elephant, and suddenly you have no time, you have no energy to do what is to be done, which is actually to remind us that we are all the people. We are not people because we have a passport with a certain color and a certain stamp on it. We are all people, and we all share the same need for safety, for freedom, for freedom of speech, for equality. And this is the main point for me. Like, we have to remind that, and instead of answering to accusations, what I think is what I try to do with my work is to shift the discussion, to take it just to another part and use art as a field where we play and where actually populism cannot play. Because art and culture is where we are strong, and we don't have anybody who can question the obvious. For example, I have been doing this work. I have initialized with a group which was called Stop Mare Mortum in Barcelona. We have started an organization back in 2015, Stop Mare Mortum, which was focused on the crimes which are happening in the Mediterranean. This constant death list, which is getting longer and longer every day, and nobody seemed back then to be interested in that. And there we have a very big, a very good example of how we should work. Instead of focusing on the pain, instead of focusing on the people who look so troubled in the sea, the people who come, who seem dehumanized because they just look like victims, is to refocus and to see that those people are just people like us, to remind ourselves like that we ourselves have been immigrants, our parents have been immigrants, our grandparents have been immigrants, and we all have taken this step because there is a common need for people which we cannot deny. It's a need to offer a secure space for your children to grow up, a space for your daughters to come to school, a space which allows you to have this minimum dignity which is denied by authoritarian regimes. And this is where actually I would put the focus on. instead of answering to this harassing talk, to this hate speech, what I think is the best thing to do is to just insist on showing what is real. And I think this is something which really affects the many. And it's just the few who will keep on shouting, even if they see a child dying. They keep on shouting because that's the only thing that they can do. While we can produce art, we can show our hearts, we can create a space of safety and humanity. And this is where actually all of the people, except of those who are either paid or just just using it to have some other kind of profit, all the people are feeling addressed, where all people see themselves and recognize that there is no such thing as a danger. There is actually a thing which is need for solidarity.
Thank you, Yorgos. And Marina, would you like to say something more about the note I asked you to underline? I mean, the roots of hate speech, which is somehow also, without knowing it, connected to what Yorgos is saying just now. But also, if you can say us something more about why fake news they seem so much dangerous today. I mean, they were always part of the play, as we are saying, but now we feel more harmless, more we feel like somehow at the beginning you were saying that everything changed, and from the radio when you were insulted by a people to people, and now this organized hate, it seems so big that we cannot defend ourselves. So I never believe there's nothing that we can do. So I'm asking you if you have a handbook for defending yourself and ourselves from hate speech and fake news. Audio, Marina.
I thought I had pushed the button, but I hadn't. I hope to be able to organize my thoughts briefly around this because there's so much to say. But first, I want to say that I am going to say very sad things about the state of the world. As I see it, I had been an optimist for many years, and I am deeply worried about our future. But I want the people who are listening to us to remember that the solution is already in what Yorgos just said. He pointed at engineering, the use of hands, that's human scale. There's only so much we can make, build, draw, cook, take care of in a certain amount of time. That is the human scale. If we don't go back to that human scale, we are going to be fucked. If we do try and go back to that human scale, everything will be faceable. Why? Because I believe that the underlying problem of both fake news and hate speech, which are two very different things, but they are connected, is the destruction of the fabric of social life, of commonality, of community. And I'll put it this way. What can we expect after more than 100 years of automated work that turned people into productive machines with fixed times and the descending fixed kind of family, fixed kind of sexuality, fixed kind of 9 to 5 organization of their domestic life? separation from families, the whole idea that if you earn enough, if you work enough, you'll earn enough, and if you earn enough, you'll buy enough, and buying makes you independent and free from others, from the need of others. That is what destroyed our empathy. And it's been a subtle, very long, very deep erosion of what kept us together. So instead of working towards being safer, we thought we were going to be safer, cushioned by money, buying, Amazon, quick food, quick shopping, also by the idea of, I don't need other people to be happy. I don't really need it, especially because relationships with people are always very complex and hard to face, especially the ones with family, original families. It's not true that it takes a village. And not only I don't need other people, but people don't need me. They don't really need me. The hate speech that I see on social media, which is particularly insulting because it uses words, and we do suffer for words, is the exact kind of violence that is happening in the streets here for a parking place, okay, in a fight for a parking place. But it's multiplied in a place where no one can see me. I need not be ashamed of anything. People are screaming even louder than me so I can afford any kind of language. And all these years made me realize that, one, as a woman, I never felt safe. I belong to a category of people who never felt safe, but who never thought of turning hateful because they never felt safe. Afro-American people never felt safe, never, ever in their lives. Kurds never felt safe. Migrants, the day they become migrants, because it's not a permanent category, the day they become migrants, stop being safe. Looking for something safer, they lose everything they have, and they put it on the line because they are trying to better their conditions for their children, for themselves. I think that the worst moment was after the 80s. In Italy especially, it was the 80s, when it was planned, it was a scientific planning in politics to draw people apart. So you just need a house. You can buy a house, you can buy a car, you can have 3 TV sets. Your children will be able to afford university, and that will certainly better their conditions. You can watch TV all day and all night, and that's all the cultural nourishment you need. And if you happen to bestow that on lazy people, it brings enormous damage. What I can say, that's my experience. Whenever I see my friends who are mothers who have small kids, I realize that whenever they complain about not having a social structure that supports them, or not having a supportive husband, or their husband can't really afford being supportive because he needs to work, they're sacrificing a lot that wouldn't happen if they had their whole village around them. Because a village can take care of many children, not just your child. And it just doesn't help you only, it helps everyone, because it's mutual, which is the dimension that Yorgos was mentioning before. What is not coming through about rescues in the Mediterranean is that we are saving them now, but in a future world, they could be saving us. That's mutual. That's the whole basis of the human community. The human community has been destroyed by the few. The fabric that keeps us together. I'll give you an example because I am obsessed with this phrase since I heard it. You know the band Blur, the British band? Their singer Damon Albarn was talking about Brexit, which of course he was aggressively against. He was for Remain. And he's suffering a lot because of Brexit. And also many people are suffering. And some of them are really, they wish it never happened because now they've seen the material consequences. What he says that what he thinks about Brexit is not the hate one. He says that self-hate won. That he saw his people running towards the cliff like lemmings and letting themselves fall from the cliff and die. That the whole Brexit operation was a desire for death. And this reconnected me to an old thought that I used to have, which I probably wrote in some very small Facebook posts years ago, which was that one day during the height of the migration crisis, I felt that people were sick of peace. The Europeans did not understand peace any longer. They needed war. They wanted conflict. They wanted crisis. They were not appreciating peace as deeply as they should have, because my grandparents still remember the war. And so it happened in most of European countries. This is a desire for death, which is, of course, very irrational, but it also coincides with the end of an era. You know, people don't understand women, trans people, migrants, but they do feel that something is going on, that we have come to some sort of showdown of what the capitalistic society has done to people, of the kind of literature that's been fed to us for the last 100 years, and how imbalanced the portions of society are. And I think what happened in the 80s in Italy is that the workers' movement was broken. The moment that they convinced us that we no longer need other workers to ally with, to fight for what was fair, to fight for their interest. Everyone thought, I am above the social fight. I no longer need to demonstrate. I no longer need to be angry. But guess what? Most of middle class people one day realized, without even being able to form this thought, but producing rage over it, that they had been betrayed, that there's no prize at the end of the 9 to 5, I don't need the village lifestyle. They're still being robbed. They're still being lied to. They still can't trust media. They never could, but they still can't trust media. And now, less than ever. So if you feel surrounded, you produce anxiety. You have no help for your children. You have no money. You have nothing of the prices that capitalism promised you. The fabric of society you can't fall back to because it's been destroyed. You can't form alliances with other workers representing the same interests that you have. And of course you're angry. And it's going to take all different kind of shapes. People, white people especially, I think, feel that they are coming for them, and they're not that wrong. And they're not that wrong. So that's where I feel that this huge amount of rage, that it's easily manipulated, it's blind rage. It's not pointed, it's not directed towards an objective. Think about what could happen if we could direct it in positive towards real safety, not law and order, but real safety, as Yorgos was saying. And of course, media have their own responsibilities because fake news always existed. Ask British people about the cheap diet of popular newspapers, gossip, tabloids. Ask them about it. They've been fed McDonald's and cheap press for 50 years. Now we can see the consequences. And they've been fooled. But they do hate people who read The Guardian. They do. And you must, I think, political political parties in all of Europe should start wonder why and asking the right questions.
So, Yorgos, I would like you to give us some light. And now, because there is a story you told me some 2 months ago when we met in Sicily, and this is a story about your village, okay, your hometown. Yorgos is coming from a village. Well, it doesn't mean it isn't the matter. It is a village, okay? It is a Malacan village, but this is not so important. And the story has to do with seeing something wrong happening and not staying in silence in your village. What can happen when this occurs? Yorgos.
Yes, it was. I'm actually in this same village right now, 2 years later. And actually, 2 years before, 2 years ago, I just experienced something which just turned my stomach upside down. We are living in a village, like this is the village of my grandfathers, my grandparents. It's a village up in the mountains in Greece. It's on 1,500 meters high. And as part of this strange policy of how to manage the refugee question, the Greek government has decided to move all refugees to the remotest parts of the country without any preparation for the people, for the migrants from the first side and the locals from the other side. Just one day, suddenly buses arrive and they are full of those people who come from Afghanistan, Syria, Kurdistan. And they arrive in a village which has never seen a black person before, which has never seen a Syrian guy before. And suddenly this village has 200 refugees living in the hotels. And it's in the beginning it was okay because people are, I think that it's a human condition that when you see people who come with their children in your place where you know that it's not the ideal place for anybody to live, you start having this sensation of kind of solidarity. So people brought them some blankets, they brought them some toys for their kids, and they had some good time during this first year until the government changed. And this was very, very important in this case. Like there was the new government came with a promise of cleaning up the country, of getting rid of all those people who are here disturbing our normal lives. And this became a very, very wide-spoken discourse, like by the local parliament member, who is a good friend of the local priest, and who is a good friend of the local right wing. So they started a campaign to kick out the migrants, kick them out, clean the mountains. Don't let us be Islamized. Don't let us become, how do you call this? When yogurt becomes bad, if it stays long out of the fridge, they use this kind of wording, which is so strange and so absurd, actually. So they managed to bring this question into the center of the village. Like they've been also so loud that no other voices could be heard. So when I came here 2 years ago, as I usually come in the summertime, I just felt in a situation. I just fall in a situation where you couldn't even talk. When you started talking about that, it's absolutely irrational to hate those people and to want to kick those people away. The only answer was, Yorgos, please, just leave it aside. Don't look for trouble. But I said, guys, this is the worst thing we can do for ourselves. It's not about the migrants. We are killing our tradition. We are killing ourselves. We are killing our souls. We are killing our children. So instead of talking to everybody, I just used my art and I just made a paper with the 10 main arguments, the 10 answers, like they will Islamize us. The answer is very simple. Our village has been under Islamic rule, under Ottoman rule for 600 years, and it never became Islamized. How can ever some 200 people who come from, which have not even shoes on, and they're just like they are so poor and have nothing in their hands except of hope? How can those people Islamize us? So there was argument, answer, and then a small drawing. A small drawing, because humor is part of what is the answer to populism. Populism tries to make us forget that we have humor, that we are people, and that humor is so basic for humans. It's one of the basic tools of humanism. It's one of the bases of our coexistence. So I made this paper. I just made 200 copies and I just gave it around. I put it up in some places around the village. And suddenly there was a little shift, which I felt by people who said, oh, okay, that's an argument. I never thought about it like before. Because if you repeat and repeat and repeat that behind me there is a building of 7 floors, after a while, you tend to just look between the trees and find the building. So this repetition just makes people forget that they have their own opinion. So this was the first little shift. And there was also a chance to talk to some people who said, like, I don't agree with you, but you have a point there, which is already something. You create a space of dialogue, which otherwise is just thrown into the river and nobody sees it anymore. And it's just a shouting, how you say, a competition of who shouts worse and who says the biggest lie, let's say so. So I was attacked by the priest of the village, who told me like I'm a traitor to country, to our village, to our tradition, and he was just shouting at me in the middle of the square. I just asked him which part of the Evangelium he was reading those beautiful accusations in. He didn't answer. He just kept on shouting. Anyway, 2 days later, we had the whole village full. I still carry it with me, with a small paper saying, "Get rid of the." Amazing wording of the wrong migrants. Get rid of all and don't support. Never give a euro to people who give shelter to those migrants. So I went to the priest with this paper in my hand. I said, "Tell me, Father, last day you just attacked me for what I said, and today this paper was in the floor of your church, and you didn't say nothing." And he told me like, "No, this is the communists who do that to say that we are racist, whatever, like there is." And whatever answer to whatever, that's a nice tactic which always works if you have a uniform on and if you represent kind of an authority. You can say whatever you want. But anyway, this just went on there was a discussion, and next day I was sitting just around the corner with at a bar, a small cafe, having a beer with my friends, and I was attacked by 15 people. Black dressed people, muscled and really angry and violent, telling me, "You will not step again into this village. This village is ours. We have said that migrants get to get out." And actually, it was such a violent moment where you feel what Marina told before. Like normally I'm a white European male and I feel secure. But suddenly I felt I was not anymore secure. But the good thing is there's all this experience of all those black people I met in my life, of all those migrants I met in my life, of all those women, of all those queer and gay people who have stood up against violence. And I said, it was just an inner move of saying, this is not attacking me. It's attacking all them. It's attacking everybody it's attacking everything I love. It's an ideological attack, not against me. It's an attack against humanity. So it was not me answering. It was all those friends from around the world who have shown me how things can be. And I just resisted. It, like I just had to ask them what made them so angry at me. Why did they want to beat me up? And they told me it's your paper. So I said, why don't you make a paper? Make a paper. Make your paper, and we can talk with the papers. I mean, paper didn't attack you. I didn't even, the paper was even really humorous. It didn't even say that those people are racist or anything. Anyway, I survived this moment, and it was really hard because the next day, it was hard to sleep, to be honest. Then it was hard to do anything. And there was a decision which I took, like, shall I just leave the village or shall I act? And I felt like I would do them a very big favor if I leave. And I would give a victory to people who don't deserve a victory. So I just worked out a plan. It was very strange because I was alone here, but I had a huge community of people which were not here in this village. And those people helped in organizing something which was a very beautiful answer. Actually, 2 weeks later, we organized with the migrants living in the hotels an action of volunteer work in the village. We just gathered all together. None of the Greek guys who are doing work as builders did want to help, but the Albanians did. The Albanian friends who have been here for 15 years and now are almost part of the village, even if nobody wants to admit it, but they are part of the village because they keep this village alive, and these houses, they don't fall because of those Albanian hands. So they took the risk and told me, Yorgos, we help you. And we just took the permission of the mayor, and we got out 80 people, children, women, kids, the Albanians with the car and their sand and stones and water and cement. And we went around and we fixed holes in the streets. We have more holes than street actually in my village. So there was lots of work to do. And we started doing that. So it was so funny. Even people who have signed the paper to kick the people out, they were coming out of their houses offering chocolate to the children and saying thank you and coming out with a jar of water, because you cannot deny that somebody is doing communal work. I mean, you cannot deny that there's people helping that this street looks like a street instead of a Swiss cheese. So we had this very nice feeling of all those people receiving, all those migrants receiving some direct sense of solidarity of people. And then the best move was, like, I had arranged that the Greek TV was there. Greek TV channel was there, live, broadcasting live, showing how the Marina people are helping the people and the migrants are with them and they do this and that. And it was suddenly those same, I don't want to say fascists because it's actually it's ignorance. It's people who have a deliberate amnesia. I don't even think that they are worth to be called fascist. Like fascists have an ideology. They are just moved by kind of a strange fear of a kind of all those things which Marina explained. So those people were sitting in the cafe in the middle of the village, and the Greek TV was showing how beautiful things were happening. And next day, the news were talking about it. The newspaper was full of it. And this made something happen. This made people coming up to ask me, maybe you did all that just for propaganda. And I said, propaganda, yes or not, you have a better street, don't you? And even if it has been just a thing to show off, guys, did you ever do something for your village? Those people coming from Afghanistan, have just done something for your village. So this changed a lot the narrative. Now, those 2 last years, and I just make it short, people are coming up to me and you say, Yorgos, some of them say, I don't agree, but I like what you've done. Others say, you know, you've been wrong because we are never against the people. We're just against the government who brought the people. And this, I consider it also already a little victory. But the biggest victory is like this year, we have come together, we built up an association, people from the village, and we made a cultural festival. So suddenly in this village, there was a group of 20 people, and we organized cinema and music and games for the children, and we made a path in the mountains. We opened the path, and we made an exhibition of artworks about botanics, and we've done 15 actions during this summer. And this is the response. The response is not to be just the one great hero who does something. This never changes things. What changes things is if we come together. And when we come together, there we can realize how much more power is in it, how easy it is to respond. Because if we are many, to organize something, to organize a beautiful event, to organize a game for the children, to organize a workshop with drawings and stuff, it's just easy. And really, it's the biggest happiness is when you do something and you see how happy people get, and you see how children are just glancing with their eyes. That's the best thing which can happen to a human person. I mean, I can eat the best food, and yeah, so what? It's not the. I mean, this hope for driving the best car and having the best house, and this doesn't make me happy. What makes me happy, and I think what makes people happy, is when they are surrounded by happy people. And that's the answer. I mean, this was just a small laboratory of how you respond to that.
Thank you, Yorgos. We are really in the end, and it's a pity because I would like to show and to ask you about another scale project you have, which is Med Faces. But I wanted to point out more about this micro-scaled project, because many times in the small project we see more inspirational things than in the big ones. But also Med Faces, I invite who is listening to us to have a look through Imagistan project, which is the name Yorgos used for his art project. I don't know if Marina would like to say goodbye to us with very few lines. And I want also to add, before saying goodbye to everybody, that we will close this presentation with some minutes of Yorgos animated documentary about Mediterranean citizenship and Mediterranean cultural space. So, Marina.
I just want to thank you, because it was really a super interesting conversation. And just as Yorgos said, beware of people who are humorless, because there's always something suspicious in being humorless. It's not our natural status. Even desperate people can be full of humor and irony. When there's no irony, it's starting to be dangerous, when people take themselves too seriously. And also that I have infinite faith in what art can do, and the power of transformation, of alchemy, that we can do through art. There's so many ways, and I'm so grateful for this conversation. Thank you both.
Thank you, Marina, and I want to thank again Fondazione Verano Centini, Istituto Salvemini, Polo del Novecento, Internazionale del Novecento di Torino, and all the people who is working not here visibly and on the screen, but there are many people who are working with us, so thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much, Elettra. Bye-bye.
Els nostres governs del nord estan convertint el mar en un mur. Els rius dels nostres països de la riba nord contaminen el mar. Les nostres empreses s'estan enriquint amb les vendes de maquinària i armament i la mà d'obra barata del sud. Els pobles del Mediterrani estem connectats per l'economia i les migracions i alhora estem vetant l'entrada a les persones dels països del sud i de l'est. Estem negant la història que ens uneix. Estem convertint el mar en una gran fossa comuna.